Okay, let's unpack this. The title alone, I have to say, it stopped me in my tracks.
Right.
The moral architecture of modern leadership.
It's a heavy phrase, isn't it? It feels substantive.
It really is. I mean, usually when we talk about leadership and values, the words we get are things like soft skills or, culture fit, or frankly, just being nice.
Right, it can all feel a bit fluffy.
Very fluffy. But architecture, that implies engineering. That implies a blueprint, a structure. It implies that if you pull one brick out, the whole house,
Yeah.
well, it could fall down.
And that is exactly where we need to start today. We are doing a deep dive into excerpts from a new book. It's called The Leadership Compass by Rizwan Ahmad.
Okay.
And the reason this text is so compelling and why we picked it for this deep dive is that Ahmad isn't treating values like they're the paint on the walls.
No.
He's treating them as the absolute foundation, the concrete slab the whole thing is built on.
Right. And looking at the notes here, the central tension in this book, it's something I think every single person listening has felt at some point. It's that battle, the battle between the right now and the long term. That conflict between squeezing out short-term results and actually building long-term confidence and trust.
Precisely. It's the classic leadership dilemma, isn't it? Do you cut a few corners to hit the quarterly target? Do you burn out your team to get the product shipped a week early?
Or do you hold
you hold the line on your values to make sure that team is still with you and still trusts you next year?
Yeah.
Ahmad's thesis, this whole moral architecture concept, is basically that those values are not optional add-ons. They are the structural integrity of success.
So our mission today, then, is to really figure out why. Why, according to the modern research he's pulling from, do values matter more now than they ever have before?
Oh.
And I have to say, I love that the author Rizwan Ahmad, he doesn't just preach this from a mountaintop.
No, he brings receipts.
He brings receipts. He backs it all up.
He certainly does. He cites a pretty heavy-hitting lineup of researchers. We're talking Kouzes and Posner, Daniel Goleman, Mullins and Christie, Brown and Treviño. It's a who's who.
It's like the Avengers of leadership theory, all assembled in one paragraph.
It really is. And, for you listening, this matters. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO, a mid-level manager, or, just someone trying to organize a community bake sale. This stuff is universal.
It is.
Because this moral architecture we're talking about, it determines whether people trust you. It determines whether they want to work for you, and ultimately whether the whole thing succeeds or just crashes and burns.
So let's get into the blueprint. The first pillar, the first part of this foundation that Ahmad talks about, it comes from the work of Kouzes and Posner.
Yes, specifically their 2017 research. And they identify what they call the single most important quality that people look for in a leader.
And this is based on a huge amount of data, right? This isn't just a handful of interviews.
Oh, this is a fascinating data point because Kouzes and Posner have been surveying tens of thousands of people globally for decades. So the patterns they see are incredibly reliable.
Okay.
And in the context of Ahmad's book, the finding is crystal clear. The number one thing people want from a leader isn't, say, intelligence. It's not strategic vision. It's not even charisma.
It's credibility.
Credibility, that is the currency of leadership. That's what the text says. And if you don't have it, you are effectively bankrupt.
Okay, but credibility is one of those big kind of vague words like synergy. What actually makes it up? How do you build it? The text breaks it down into two very specific components.
Honesty and consistency.
And the pairing of those two is what's so critical.
It really is. I mean, think about it. We all hear that phrase, honesty is the best policy. But in a leadership context, honesty without consistency is just confusing. It might even be damaging.
That's a really interesting point. Let's explore that a bit. If I'm honest with you today, say I tell you exactly what the numbers are, I'm totally transparent about the budget challenges we're facing.
Yeah, so far so good. I appreciate that.
But then tomorrow, I'm hiding things.
Yeah.
Or I'm spinning the truth because I'm stressed about a meeting with my own boss. Am I credible?
No, not at all. You were honest once. That's an event. A single data point. Credibility is a state of being. It's a reputation. It requires a pattern. Ahmad uses Kouzes and Posner to make the point that you absolutely need both. You have to be truthful, of course, but you also have to be predictable in your truthfulness.
So consistency is the mortar holding the bricks of honesty together. That's the moral architecture.
Exactly. I love that. If the architecture is shaky, if the floor moves a little bit every time you step on it, you don't feel safe, you can't relax, that's what inconsistency does to a team.
You're always on edge.
Always. If a leader oscillates between being totally transparent and then suddenly secretive, the team spends all its energy just trying to guess, trying to figure out which version of the leader showed up today.
And you can't build anything on that kind of ground. It's a huge cognitive load, isn't it? If I have to spend, say, 20% of my brain power every morning trying to figure out if you're telling me the truth today,
Right.
that's 20% of my energy and focus I'm not using to actually solve the problem we're supposed to be working on.
Spot on. That is the hidden tax of inconsistency, the productivity cost. And this leads directly to the ultimate outcome that Ahmad highlights: trust.
Ah, okay.
The equation is simple, but it's pretty brutal. Honesty plus consistency equals credibility. And credibility is the only thing that equals trust.
And without trust, what are you left with?
Without trust, you don't have a team. It's that simple. You have a group of individuals who are all just watching their backs.
People creating paper trails?
Exactly. You've got people creating paper trails instead of products. They're writing CYA emails instead of innovating. It's a culture of defense, not a culture of growth.
That perfectly sets up the next layer of this architecture.
Yeah.
Because once you have that foundation of trust, you still have to get people to actually move.
Yeah.
How do you get them to perform?
Actually do the work.
Right. And this is where Ahmad brings in the work of Daniel Goleman and the whole concept of emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Goleman he's a giant in this field. And the text cites his work from 2018, where he focuses on 3 specific traits of these emotionally intelligent leaders:
Which are?
self-awareness, empathy, and authenticity.
Okay, I want to park those for 1 second and focus on the outcome first.
Okay.
Because the text makes a distinction here that I think is absolutely brilliant. It's the difference between compliance and commitment.
This is the pivot point. This is the whole ball game for modern leadership, I think. If you can understand this one distinction, you understand how to manage people effectively in the 21st century.
So let's define them, because I think all of us, we've felt both sides of this coin in our careers. Based on the text, compliance is purely transactional.
Right. Compliance is just doing what you're told. It is checking the box. It is doing the bare minimum required to not get fired.
It's the old contract.
It's the old contract, exactly. I pay you a wage, you give me 8 hours of your time. It's very industrial age.
I did the report, boss. It's on your desk.
Precisely. I arrived at 9:00, left at 5:00. I did the tasks on my list.
Yeah.
That is compliance. And look, for a long, long time, compliance was enough. If you're running a factory line, you just need people to pull the lever.
You don't need them to love the lever?
You don't need them to love the lever. You don't need them to dream about new and better ways to pull the lever. You just need them to pull it reliably.
But we aren't just pulling levers anymore. Most of us, anyway.
No. Most of us are knowledge workers now. We solve complex problems. We deal with tricky clients. We design things that have never existed before. And that requires a completely different type of energy.
Which is commitment.
Which is commitment. That's why Ahmad contrasts compliance with commitment. Commitment is it's inspired action. It's emotional investment. It's the critical difference between I have to do this and I want to do this.
I love that framing. Want to versus have to. It's about discretionary effort, right?
Yeah.
It's that extra 10%, that extra hour, that extra idea you give because you actually care about the outcome, not because someone is standing over your shoulder.
That's it. It's the work that gets done after the boss leaves the room. That's commitment.
So the big question is, how does a leader get commitment? You can't order someone to be committed. You can't just say, I command you to care.
No, that usually has the exact opposite effect. You can force compliance. You can use fear and hierarchy and threats to get compliance, absolutely. But you can never, ever force commitment.
So it's something that has to be earned.
It creates itself, in a way. It's a response to something.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Goleman's work, it is a direct response to a leader's empathy and authenticity.
Okay, connect those dots for us. How does empathy trigger commitment? Because I can hear a skeptic in their car right now saying, isn't empathy justice? Holding hands and singing Kumbaya, I got a business to run.
Not at all. That's a huge misconception. Let's go back to the moral architecture. If I am a leader who completely lacked self-awareness, let's say I'm stomping around the office, I'm stressed, I'm firing off angry emails, totally unaware of how my mood is poisoning the room.
Right. We've all seen that guy.
We have. What do you do in that situation? You go into defensive mode, you shut down, you give that leader just enough compliance to stay safe, you hide your best ideas because you don't want to risk getting your head bitten off.
You keep your head down, you become a gray rock. You just try to be invisible.
Exactly. But on the other hand, if I am self-aware and I lead with empathy, if I actually take a moment to understand the challenges you're facing, if I see you as a human being and not just a unit of production, that creates a bond.
You feel seen.
You feel seen. You feel understood. And when people feel seen and understood, a very, very human thing happens. They want to reciprocate. They commit to the project. They commit to the goal because they feel personally and emotionally connected to the leader.
And the authenticity piece is part of that too.
Right?
The text mentions authentic leaders as being key.
Yes. An authentic leader is real. They aren't a robot reading a corporate script. They're a person. They admit when they don't know something. They show vulnerability. They are consistent in who they are.
So they're not putting on a boss costume every morning.
Precisely. And when a leader is authentic, they invite people to follow them. It's an invitation, not a command. That is what generates commitment. It really is the fundamental difference between a boss and a leader. A boss drives people from behind. A leader coaches them from the front.
It's funny because we so often categorize empathy as a soft skill, like it's just something nice to have if you have the time for it. But in this architectural context, it's actually a performance driver. It's a tool.
A powerful one.
If you want maximum output, you need commitment. And to get commitment, you need to apply EQ. It's a mechanical cause and effect relationship.
That is the argument, 100%. It's not about being nice for the sake of being nice. It's about being effective. It's about unlocking the discretionary effort that is latent in your team. Compliance gets you 80% of their effort, maybe.
The part they're paid for.
The part they're paid for. Commitment gets you that extra 20% that actually drives innovation and problem solving and excellence. And in any competitive market, that 20% is the difference between winning and losing.
Okay, so we've laid the foundation with credibility. We've built the walls with EQ driving commitment. Now, let's zoom out a bit. The text moves on to Mullins and Christie from 2023, so this is very recent.
Very recent.
And they talk about the ripple effect, how a leader's individual moral architecture ends up defining the entire organizational culture.
This is where we stop looking at the leader just as an individual and start looking at them as a thermostat.
A thermostat. That's an interesting choice of words. Not a thermometer.
No, and the distinction is crucial. A thermometer just reflects the temperature in the room. It tells you if it's tense or collaborative. A thermostat, on the other hand, sets the temperature.
It controls the environment.
It controls the environment. And Mullins and Christie's research suggests that organizational behavior and the prevailing culture depend heavily on the moral example set by the leader.
Moral example.
Yeah.
That phrase, it feels like it has a lot of weight to it. It implies the leader is constantly being watched.
Constantly. The leader is always on stage, whether they like it or not. Every email they send, every meeting they run, every decision they make is a signal. Their behavior sets the baseline for what is acceptable and what is rewarded in that culture.
Humans are mimetic creatures, right? We copy the people at the top.
We do. We look up the hierarchy to see how to behave, how to get ahead. The leader's actions are the most powerful form of communication they have.
So let's play this out with some specific everyday examples. If the leader is, say, 5 minutes late to every single meeting,
then being late becomes the culture. It sends a clear signal that punctuality is optional and that other people's time isn't particularly valuable.
okay, if the leader consistently interrupts people while they're speaking,
Then interrupting becomes the culture. You've just sanctioned bad communication and signaled that listening isn't a priority.
and now for the big one. If the leader cuts ethical corners, if they say something like, look, just ship it, nobody will notice that bug until next quarter, or just fudge the numbers on that expense report, everyone does it.
Then the moral architecture of the entire organization becomes fundamentally unstable. This is the real danger. If the leader lacks that moral compass we talked about at the start,
Yeah.
they are essentially giving explicit permission for everyone else in the organization to lack it too. They're setting the moral floor, and it's in the basement.
It creates a race to the bottom.
It absolutely does. And it spreads like a virus through the organization. If my boss doesn't care about quality, why should I? If my boss lies to clients, why shouldn't I lie on my timesheet?
And the reverse is also true, I assume.
Absolutely. Conversely, if the leader models incredibly high standards, if they are that moral example, that ripples out too. It creates a culture where integrity is the norm, not the exception.
It raises the bar for
It
everyone.
raises the bar. When the leader acts with integrity, especially when it's hard to do so, it creates social pressure for everyone else to do the same. It
Yeah.
becomes how we do things around here. It becomes the new normal.
This brings us to the skeptics. It has to.
Yeah.
Because I know there's someone listening to this right now, maybe on their commute, thinking, okay, this all sounds great. This is a lovely fairy tale. Ideally, yes, we'd all be credible, empathetic, moral examples. But I have targets to hit. I have shareholders breathing down my neck. This ethics stuff is a luxury I can't always afford.
It's the soft ideal argument. The idea that ethics is a nice to have, but results are a must have.
Exactly. The idea that all this talk of moral architecture is just fluff. But the text anticipates this, and it tackles it head on with research from Brown and Treviño from 2006.
And this is where we get into the really hard metrics. This is where the rubber meets the road. Brown and Treviño's work is all about debunking that very myth, that ethics is just a nice to have. They argue it is a direct, measurable factor in organizational performance.
Let's list these out because they are significant. The text specifically calls out 3 major areas: performance, staff retention, and reputation.
Let's take staff retention first because that links back so perfectly to our earlier discussion on Goleman and commitment.
Okay.
If you have a leader who lacks a moral compass, people might stay for the paycheck for a little while. But eventually, the cognitive dissonance just becomes too much to bear.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by cognitive dissonance in this context?
It's that awful mental stress you feel when you hold 2 contradictory beliefs at the same time. If I believe deep down that I am an honest person, but my leader is forcing me to be dishonest with customers every day,
You feel like a fraud.
you feel like a fraud. Your actions are in conflict with your values, and that creates a constant low-grade psychological pain. It's exhausting. And high performers, the people who are great at what they do and have other options, they will not tolerate that pain for long. They will leave.
And we all know turnover is unbelievably expensive. The cost of recruiting, the cost of onboarding, the months of lost productivity, the lost institutional knowledge.
It's incredibly expensive. It's a huge, often hidden drain on the bottom line. So ethical leadership directly creates stability in the workforce. That's a hard metric. You can see it on a P&L statement.
Okay, what about performance? How does being ethical actually drive better output?
Think about the friction. The organizational drag that's caused by a lack of trust. If I don't trust you or my boss, I have to document everything. I have to double check all your work. I have to play politics to protect my own turf.
You have to CC 5 people on every single email just to cover your back.
Yes, all that energy is wasted. It's like pouring sand in the gears of the organization. It slows everything down.
So an ethical environment is a low-friction environment.
Exactly. Things just move faster. Decisions are made more quickly because people aren't constantly second-guessing motives. They're focused on the work, not on the internal politics.
Yeah.
And that leads to better performance.
And the third one was reputation.
Which, in the digital age, is more fragile and more valuable than ever. How the outside world views your organization can change in an instant.
A single tweet can tank a stock.
It can. A leader with a strong moral architecture acts as a guardian of that reputation. A leader without one is a ticking time bomb. They put the entire brand at risk every single day with every poor decision they make.
But the text does admit something that's, well, it's a little scary. It says, and I'm quoting here, "In contrast, when leaders lack a moral compass, short-term results may be achieved."
And we have to be honest about that. It's true. You can cheat your way to a good quarter. You can bully your team to hit an impossible deadline. You can absolutely sell a product that you know is flawed and make a quick profit.
It works. For a while.
It works until it doesn't. And the text adds the crucial caveat right after that. But confidence erodes quickly. It's a sugar high. You get that burst of energy, that quick win, but you are literally burning the furniture to heat the house.
I like that image. Burning the furniture to heat the house. It works for an hour, maybe 2, but then you're left with no furniture and the house is cold again.
And you've lost the confidence of your people. Once that confidence is gone, once the moral architecture has collapsed, it is almost impossible to rebuild. You might have won the battle for the Q3 numbers, but you have fundamentally lost the war for the organization's future.
This brings us really to the final synthesis of all this source material. The text closes with a very powerful distinction. It frames the whole thing as turning values into lived practice rather than slogans.
Slogans! Oh man, we see them everywhere, don't we? The values carved into the granite of the corporate lobby or printed on the company mouse pads.
Integrity, excellence, teamwork.
Right. But then you walk through the office, and the reality on the ground is totally, completely different. The company that preaches teamwork is full of silos that actively sabotage each other. The company that has integrity on the wall is hiding fees from customers.
It's the slogan trap.
It is, and Ahmad warns against it so strongly because if your values are just slogans on a wall, they are worse than useless. They become a source of cynicism.
They make people cynical.
Deeply cynical. It breeds profound distrust. It creates that pervasive feeling that management is lying to us, that none of this is real.
So how do we get out of that trap? How do we move from slogans to what the text calls lived practice?
It comes right back to where we started. It's Kouzes and Posner's consistency, and it's Mullins and Christie's being the example.
It's about behavior, not words.
It is entirely 100% about behavior. Lived practice means that the values are visible in the actual decisions the leader makes, especially the hard decisions when there's pressure to do otherwise.
It's easy to have integrity when things are going well.
Of course. It's easy to be honest when the sales numbers are great. But what about when you miss a target? What about when a huge mistake is made? Do you throw someone under the bus, or do you take public responsibility? Do you admit the failure to the client and make it right? That is lived practice.
And the text says leaders must model the behaviors they wish to see.
That is the golden thread. It ties all of these different sources together. If you want a credible team, you have to model honesty and consistency. If you want a committed team, you must model empathy and authenticity. If you want a high-performing ethical culture, you have to be the primary moral example. You have to go first.
It sounds so simple when you say it like that, but it's incredibly difficult to do day in and day out under pressure.
It is. It is the hardest work of leadership. It requires discipline. It requires suppressing your ego. But the payoff, as Brown and Treviño showed us, is real, and it is measurable. It's not just about, feeling good about yourself in the mirror, though that's important too. It's about building an organization that can actually weather storms because its foundation, its architecture, is solid.
So let's try to summarize this journey we've been on. We started with this big idea that values are structural, not decorative. We looked at credibility, built on honesty and consistency as the foundation.
Then we moved up to the walls of the house, if you want to continue the metaphor, the leader's emotional intelligence that creates commitment rather than just grudging compliance.
Then we looked at the atmosphere inside that house, the culture, which is set by the leader acting as a thermostat, as a moral example.
And finally, we looked at the structural integrity reports, the hard research showing that this isn't some soft ideal, but a concrete driver of staff retention, public reputation, and long-term performance.
It all comes back to that title, doesn't it? The moral architecture. It's what holds everything else up.
And like any real architecture, it needs constant maintenance. You have to check for cracks. You have to reinforce the beams after a storm. It's an active, ongoing process. You don't just build it once and then walk away.
For you listening, I think that so what here is pretty profound, because whether you are running a Fortune 500 company or a small team of 3 people, or even just managing your own family dynamic, these principles are universal.
They really are. Trust operates the same way in a boardroom as it does at a dinner table. Empathy works the same way. Consistency works the same way. If you want people to be committed to you, to your vision, to your relationship, you have to provide that moral consistency.
It really challenges that old archetype of the ruthless leader that Hollywood and pop culture love to portray. The guy who yells and lies and schemes and always wins.
That guy might win the scene in a movie, but in the real world, based on all the research we've looked at today, that guy loses his best people, he destroys his culture from the inside out, and eventually he crashes the company. The model is fundamentally broken.
Real winning is sustainable, and it seems sustainability requires morality.
That's the takeaway right there.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that isn't explicitly in the text we read, but just jumps out from this whole slogans versus practice idea.
Okay, what's that?
Imagine if we could print out a complete, unedited transcript of every action we took and every word we said over the last week. Not what we meant to do or what we think we did, but what we actually verifiably did and said. If we handed that transcript to a complete stranger, someone who knows nothing about us, would they be able to accurately guess our values? Or would they see a total disconnect between the values we claim to have and how we actually spent our time and energy?
That is a terrifying and a very necessary question. The transcript test.
Exactly, the transcript test. Are your values just a poster on the wall of your life, or are they the actual script you're living by? Something to think about. That's it for this deep dive into the moral architecture of modern leadership. Thanks for listening.